Welcome to Movie Oubliette, the film review podcast for movies that most people have mercifully forgotten.
I'm Dan.
And I'm Conrad, and in each episode, we drag a forsaken film out of the oubliette,
Discuss it and judge it to decide whether it should be set free
or whether it should be thrown back and consigned to oblivion forever. We review the films others tend to forget. Come with us and open up the movie oubliette. Welcome to episode 158 of Movie Oubliette, the bi-continental podcast for forgotten fantastical films with me, Conrad, getting ready to fly in Cambridge, UK.
Oh, exciting. And me, Dan, catching up on horror down here in Melbourne, Australia.
Ooh. We focus on forgotten fantasy, sci-fi and horror films because we love bare-breasted supervillains, magical laser weapons and werewolf men tearing naked women limb from limb.
Oh,
hello, Dan.
Of course. That's exactly what we like to see.
Yeah.
Hello, Conrad. How are you today?
Well, I'm excited because I'm going on holiday soon, and it's my favourite type of holiday. It's a movie-related holiday. I'm actually going to a film festival, and when this episode comes out, I will be in the midst of Fest, so should be fun.
Yes. It's amazing. And Conrad, where are you going?
So I'm going to Toronto for the very first time.
Wow.
Yeah.
Canada?
Indeed, yeah. So I'll be able to meet up with Joe Lipsett, often of this parish.
Yes.
So that should be fun. We should be able to watch some movies together at TIFF, the Toronto International Film Festival.
Oh, I'm so jealous. It's going to be amazing.
Yeah. It's going to be great. I've checked. The weather's going to be great. Loads of really great movies. And to top it all, because I entered us as a podcast, they've given me press credentials, so I can go and watch anything I want.
That's amazing.
For nothing.
That's amazing.
So, yeah, I will be doing some reviews for our patrons. I will be doing some roving reporting while I'm there and let you know what I think of the films I see.
Yeah.
So stay tuned on Patreon for that.
Ooh, rubbing shoulders with the celebrities as well as other content creators.
I hope so, yeah. Might even find some future guests and collaborators. We shall see.
Oh, great.
Yeah.
That's really great.
And you're catching up with horror.
Yeah, I don't know. I always go long stints of just not watching any horror movies. So I've been watching a few recently. Checked out The Ruins. We were talking about natural horror movies. I really do like movies with plants, killer plants. Like I haven't seen Day of the Triffids or read the book, so maybe I should check that out. But yeah, it's an interesting genre, killer plants.
Yeah, it is. I watched the classic BBC TV series Day of the Triffids from the early 80s with my brother over Christmas. It's still a really potent piece of apocalyptic drama.
Wow.
I thought. I really enjoyed it.
Oh, okay. I should check it out. I think it's on Canopy here. But I need to check it out. Another horror movie we watched last night that is quite shocking. It was Men.
Oh, yes.
Directed by Alex Garland. And oh my God, I did not need to see that.
No.
I need to burn out my eyes now. That is all levels of shocking.
It is, yeah. That final scene, wow. Yeah. David Cronenberg wouldn't even make that kind of thing up.
But yes, just catching up on my horror, which it's been good. It's been good.
Yeah.
So I guess we should move on to mailbag now, Conrad. What have our listeners been saying?
Well, they've been catching up on our previous episodes. So long-time listener Nick got in touch to say that on long weekend, had never heard of this movie before, but watched it and loved it. Thanks, guys.
Ooh.
There's something about a beautifully shot 70s thriller that just holds up so well before CGI came along and ruined everything.
Yes. Yeah, I do love anything pre-90s. No matter how bad the movies are or like low budget, they do hold up purely because of no CGI.
Yeah, and location shooting as well. It feels like the 70s was
Yes.
an era when people were really taking the cameras out on the road.
Yeah, exactly. Yes.
Love it. Melinda got in touch on People Under the Stairs. She said, I loved this movie when I first saw it. I'm doubting it would hold up to a second viewing. What do you think?
Oh, so has she had a second viewing of it?
No.
She should.
Yeah, I think so. I think you'd get more out of it. You watch it the second time. See, the first time I saw it, I was disappointed it wasn't a Wes Craven, full horror movie. So I needed to see it again to really appreciate it, I think.
Yeah, I think so.
And finally, we heard from Serge of Cold Crash Pictures. Hello, Serge.
Hello, Serge.
Yeah. And we'll be saying hello to Serge again soon.
Yeah.
Wes Craven always had a satirical streak in him, but The People Under the Stairs might be his one true satire. A sledgehammer blunt condemnation of landlordism and gentrification that's as funny as it is disturbing.
Yeah.
Absolutely right.
Yeah, the balance was done well, I thought.
Yeah. And he's right. I think it is probably his only genuinely funny or intentionally funny movie.
I found Scream funny when I first watched it.
No, that's true.
It is very...
Mostly Matthew Lillard.
Yeah, it is very satirical and meta. Like, to the point where it is intentionally laughable.
Yeah. I think more so as it goes on, like Scream 2, where there's a movie within the movie.
Yeah, it gets ridiculous.
Yeah. I thought that was very funny.
Yeah.
Genuinely funny. Yeah. But yes, thank you everyone for writing in. We do love hearing from you.
Yep, we do. Okay, let's move on to the movie today. Conrad, what are we doing?
Well, let me just run in slow motion towards the oubliette. Find out. God, it's really foggy in here.
Oh, wow. No visibility, Conrad.
No idea where I'm going. Luckily, there's just grass everywhere. Oh! Ow! Needles! So many needles!
Oh, get down!
Oh, I've found the movie. I'm coming back.
I offer you my body and my soul.
Oh, hopefully you didn't get hit by any of those.
There's loads of them. I'm just brushing them off now. Oh, dear.
Okay, Conrad, what do you have?
Well, I have the 1983 Italian dark fantasy film Conquest, directed by Lucio Fulci, based on a screenplay by Gino Capponi, Carlos Vassallo, and Jose Antonio Della Loma.
Ooh. And who's in this movie?
It stars Jorge Rivero, Andrea Occhipinti, I'm massacring these surnames, Conrado San Martin, and Sabrina Ciani.
So Fulci tackling fantasy. What happens?
Yeah. Well, Dan, in an unspecified ancient time, a handsome young hero named Ilias leaves his native home of dreamy double exposures to do battle with evil in a smog-shrouded wilderness, armed only with a magical bow that will become even more powerful when he achieves manhood.
Oh.
Ilias finds himself in a cruel world where small tribes of simple folk are torn apart by roving bands of werewolves, the minions of a sinister sorceress named Ocron, who wears little more than a bronze mask and has rather intimate relationships with her pet snake. Ocron has a vision that Ilias will bring about her downfall, so she promises her body and soul to the great Zora if he kills Ilias. Fortunately, Ilias finds an unlikely friend in Mace, a roguish nomad who lives at one with nature and only eats dead animals he can steal from other people that he sometimes kills. The pair do battle with swamp zombies, cobwebbed rock monsters, and vicious clumps of grass. But can they defeat Ocron and rid the land of her evil? Or will one of them be beheaded in the second act, and the other burn his body and smear himself in their ashes?
Yes.
Who knows? Find out after the break.
Yes, and we will be joined by a special guest to help us.
A very special guest, yes, who chose this movie. Our special guest today is a writer-director of original, intelligent and riveting films such as Cube, Splice, Haunter and Cypher. He deservedly received the Canadian Trailblazer Award at this year's Fantasia Film Festival in Montreal, where he urged audiences to embrace weirdness to beat the algorithm, a principle that might help us for today's film choice. It is, of course, returning champion Vincenzo Natali. Hooray!
Hey.
Thank you, Conrad. Thank you, Dan.
Welcome back.
What a wonderful introduction that is.
Well, welcome back. What have you been up to? How have you been?
I've been very well. I've also been very dull.
Oh,
So I don't have a lot of interesting things to tell you, as it has been a slow recovery from the strike.
of course.
But things are looming on the horizon, I hope. Lots of time to watch movies.
Okay. Anything you particularly enjoyed recently?
I saw a film that I had to kind of let it sink in before I even knew how I felt about it. But I quite liked I Saw the TV Glow. Do you know it?
I've heard of it.
Yeah.
I haven't seen it. I'm hoping to catch it on my flight, actually.
Oh, yeah. That would work. It's that kind of movie. I think it could work on an airplane
Okay.
because it's very meta. And at this stage in my life, I'm just interested in new things. And I thought it was a very fresh voice talking
yes.
about interesting things that aren't usually presented in a mainstream film. So, yeah, it was good.
Oh,
Yeah.
great.
So have you got anything coming up soon that you can talk about, or is it all in the early stages?
I did something insane. And I'm not sure I would recommend it for anybody, but I recorded an album
Wow.
of music.
Wow.
Yeah. It's on all the streaming platforms for anyone who cares to punish themselves, but it's called Delicate Machine.
Ooh.
Yeah, it's my experiment. I'm not a musician. I have no musical ability, but I so enjoy creating music and soundscapes. I finished the thing. I thought, well, why not?
Wow.
Okay.
So it's out there.
What sort of genre would you say it is?
Same genre as Conquest. I don't know.
Oh, okay.
As in like very weird and confused. It's ambient, but it has its toes and things that are a little more structured. There's some piano in there. There's a little bit of melody.
Okay.
Oh, cool.
Not too much.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, so that was fun. And then I think since I last spoke to you, I put out a graphic novel that I wrote and illustrated called Tech.
Oh, I think you did mention that. Yeah.
Yeah, so that's out now, and that is also available wherever you can buy things online.
Yeah.
So yeah, those are kind of the two new things I have out in the world.
Nice.
Check them out. You haven't ventured into the world of prog rock synthesizer music by any chance?
Well, there's a little bit of that going on.
Okay.
Yeah, there's a
interesting.
little bit of that. Nothing at the level of the Claudio Simonetti score that we hear in Conquest. But
Indeed, yes. So you've chosen for us a fascinating film, Conquest, from 1983. I think you'd loosely call it a sword and sorcery film directed by Lucio Fulci, something that neither I nor Dan knew existed.
No.
I'd never seen it, Dan, you'd never seen it.
No.
So, Vincenzo, what's your history with this movie? How did it enter your life? What was the meet cute of Conquest?
well, I feel like I need to give you a long explanation
Okay, go for it.
because it sort of took me years to come to this point. But the short version is, not so long ago, I was on a quest to watch sword and sorcery type movies that I hadn't seen. And I somehow stumbled on this thing. I realized that Lucio Fulci had made a sword and sorcery film, which was absolutely mind-blowing to me.
Yeah.
There's nothing else like that on his resume. And then when I saw photos from it, I instantly had to see it. Like I had no choice. And I don't believe it was streaming at that point. I think I just ordered the DVD, and I was not disappointed. It was everything I sort of hoped it would be and more. And I've seen it a number of times since then. This was maybe 4 or 5 years ago. And my affection for it has grown, and my admiration has grown with each viewing. But the long story, and I try not to make it long, is that I am of a certain vintage. So I was a kid in the 70s, and I have a memory that predates Star Wars. And that time was very rife with sword and sorcery literature and comic books and art. There weren't really many movies. There were Ray Harryhausen films, In fact, the first memory I have of seeing a movie in a movie theater was The Golden Voyage of Sinbad.
Oh, wow.
Ooh.
Which to this day is a movie I have great affection for. But that was about it, in the arena of cinema. But in all these other media, it was very present. And I think it was partly because it was embraced by the counterculture of the 60s, and then that had spread out to the larger culture in the 1970s. So by the time Star Wars came out, people were, even if they didn't know it, were so hungry for something like that. And I count Star Wars as a fantasy film, not really a science fiction movie.
Sure, yeah.
Because I often think fantasy films tend to be spiritual and pure science fiction tends to be philosophical. And to me, Star Wars is very spiritual. There's nothing philosophical about it. And then, of course, what Star Wars did then, because of its massive success, was it opened the gates for all these other things to come into the world. And so, by the early 80s, and our film that we're talking about today was released in 1983, there was a plethora of fantasy. And people, I think, realized at the time that while Star Wars was a sci-fi movie, it was really in its heart a fantasy film. So there was just an incredible, I would say, renaissance of fantasy films, in that period, lasting up until probably the end of the 80s. That was my coming of age time. So it's very infused into who I am and how I evolved or devolved. And that's why we've come to this place with Conquest.
Yes.
Yes, that's a great scene setter. So I'm a Fulci virgin. I've not seen anything of his. So this is my entry point for Fulci.
How great.
That's a strange entry point.
Yes, I watched The Beyond today to try and give myself more of a feel for what he's primarily known for, which is a series of very gory, visually stylish movies in the early to mid 80s. And this is kind of an anomaly, or at least it feels that way to people who remember Fulci, because they remember him for the horror, which was probably his biggest peak. But reading up on it, it appears that the Italian movie industry is very much governed by very, very short, intense trends whereby they are reacting to a hit movie, and all of a sudden dozens of movies in the same vein get put into production rapidly. And so Fulci may have been well known for his horror because horror was so big at that point, and he did some, but he apparently was also involved in westerns, children's adventure films. He did a couple of White Fang movies, apparently. Period costume dramas, crime thrillers, a dystopian sci-fi tale. And in amongst all of these is this, which I think is a reaction to Quest for Fire from 1981, as well as Conan, the first Conan movie. Yeah. So he just suddenly finds himself a gun for hire in this genre. And I think he gave it a unique Fulci flavor.
Yeah. No, he really did. And Fulci, I'm not like a super fan or anything, but I am rarely disappointed by him, because I think anything that I've seen of his, and I certainly haven't seen everything. There's like 60 films on his resume.
Yeah.
There is always something extraordinary.
Yes.
There may be things that are not so great, but he always goes somewhere where no one else would go. And, as you reach my age, you've seen a lot of movies. It's like being a gourmand, and you develop an interest in unusual tastes. So it's like, suddenly you might be very interested in sea urchin.
Yes.
Right.
And so Fulci is kind of like cinematic sea urchin to me, because he's like, he's giving you something that's unique, sometimes slightly unpleasant, but is entirely his own and is very, very provocative.
Yeah.
And I think that's true of this film.
Yes. I have seen a few Fulci movies. I'm always surprised when Conrad tells me this is his first one. I went through a huge zombie phase. So, of course, he is like one of the godfathers of zombie movies. So I had to watch Zombie and The Beyond. And my actual first Fulci movie is City of the Living Dead, otherwise known as The Gates of Hell. I watched it during a movie marathon. I went to a film festival. This is when I lived in New Zealand. And they showed like 5 movies in one night. And City of the Living Dead was one of them. And it blew me away. Fulci has a way of like showing things you didn't know were possible, or you didn't know needed to be seen. Like in Zombie, you've got a zombie attacking a shark. You've got that famous eye gouging splinter scene as well. It's just iconic. And yeah, this movie on paper, it sounds crazy. It's like, oh, Fulci doing high fantasy. Like, how would that work out? And then you watch it and you realize, oh yeah, of course. Of course it's going to be pretty much a zombie movie disguised as a fantasy movie, which is amazing.
Yeah,
Incredible gore.
It's very special. There isn't a lot of films out there that you could compare it to.
No.
Sorry, I should say you could compare it to a lot of things, but there's not a lot of things out there that do what it's doing. And that kind of dark fantasy certainly has vanished in the following decades. I mean, the only place you can really find it is on television, with Game of Thrones or House of the Dragon or The Witcher or something like that. But they don't really make those movies, I suspect, just because, like, the same reason there aren't a lot of cyberpunk movies, because they're expensive to make and there are not enough people out there to make them successful. So I think that it's very special, that this film exists. And even at the time, I don't think there are many fantasy films that are as infused with horror as this one. It's like, and I should preface that by saying, like, sword and sorcery, quest type movies that have that much horror in them. And it's a wonderful blend.
Yeah. There were kind of two types of fantasy movies that existed in the 80s. There was an action-adventure, family-friendly, wizards and civilization type fantasy movies. And then there were the big, burly dudes with huge swords, like killing everyone type fantasy movies. And this is, that type of fantasy movie doesn't really exist. Like, you do have Game of Thrones, but they're all very civilized. There's lots of bureaucracy and politics, and it's a different tone, whereas this is it's just like bare bones, like just surviving. You gotta kill people to survive. Like, it's quite bleak as well. Like, it's a very savage, brutal world that Conquest lives in.
Yes. And very dreamlike.
Yes.
It's kind of a barbarian fever dream.
It is. It's peculiar, is it? I mean, because you start with our hero, Ilias, I think he's called, and he appears to be in some sort of strange double exposure world that sort of half reminded me of Clash of the Titans, the realm of the gods, sort of like Olivia Newton-John's Xanadu.
With a similar score.
Yeah, exactly. I didn't know whether he was going to create a roller disco or conquer the Titans. It was one of the two. So it starts there, and then when he goes down to the dark realm that you can sort of sense his family really doesn't want him to go to because it's, it's bad down there. It appears to have been shot entirely during a forest fire, this movie, because there is not a frame of it that isn't suffused in smoke. It's very dreamy, the whole movie. And a lot of shots where people are framed with the sun or some other light source directly behind them.
I read that it was a conscious choice to help hide the less than impressive makeup stuff that Fulci had to work with.
Okay.
But it's a very striking looking movie, and the palette of it is straight out of a Frank Frazetta painting. And they shot a lot at Magic Hour. I mean, this is like Days of Heaven. Like, they must have, I don't know what their shooting schedule is like or how they made it work, but there's a lot of Magic Hour stuff. So you have these beautiful bruised skies. And as you said, these silhouetted figures, and then it's all shot through, some kind of Vaseline on the lens or some sort of filter.
Yeah, it's very soft focus.
Yes. So it ends up being very evocative. And it falls into a certain category of film. It's not like a movie about a mythology or for a myth. It feels like a movie from the time of that mythology or myth. You're presented with something that isn't working hard to explain itself to you. You're dropped into this world without a map as a tourist, and you just kind of have to figure out how things work. And there's even a kind of morality at play that is very diffuse and difficult to decipher. And if anything, in these kinds of movies, morality is very, very clear. There's always like extreme good and extreme evil. But, we see Mace, one of the heroes, kill some innocent
hunter
walking by. Completely shoots him in the front from
just practicing,
like a sniper from a position he could possibly see him in cold blood, kills him. And I think that makes the movie interesting because you aren't entirely sure how to take that.
Yeah. He's very principled when it comes to animals. He doesn't kill animals to eat them, but he will kill humans and steal the animals that they've killed. It doesn't seem to be following the hero's journey either, because there are some striking divergences from the hero's journey.
Yeah. I mean, I did want to ask, is Ilias like a demigod? Like, is the first scene some sort of heavenly other world, and then he goes down to Earth or something? What is he tasked with? With saving the land? Like, he's given the bow by the wise people and sent to this land to save them? Is that his quest?
It feels like his quest is like one of self-empowerment. Like he's going to go somewhere.
Yeah.
They don't seem to be specifying where he should go. That he should just go somewhere and then, prove his mettle.
Right, yes.
Yes, at which point his bow will be upgraded. It will level up to a laser bow that can fire 6 lasers at once through rock.
Yeah.
Yeah.
I love that.
It's great.
And heat-seeking as well.
Yes.
You don't even have to aim the thing. It's amazing.
Yeah. Yeah, no, I know what you mean, Dan. I looked at it and thought, is he a demigod? Is he sort of Perseus? Again, I was thinking Clash of the Titans, but I'm not sure because, I mean, of course, spoilers here for anybody who's listening who hasn't heard Conquest. And if you haven't, stop this now and go and find it and watch it.
Yes.
He does not survive the movie. And I was quite shocked when Mace stumbled upon his headless corpse hanging upside down from the ceiling.
Yeah.
Because he's killed off screen even.
Yeah.
It's really amazing. I think that the movie is doing things that other Campbellian Heroes Quest movies would never consider doing. And they're often a little bit underwhelming or retrograde, I would say, because there's no damsel to save. The only moment there's a damsel, she's very quickly killed brutally.
Yes.
So it's just about these two men. And I think the movie, consciously or not, avoids a lot of the cringy kind of sexual politics that are often associated with these kinds of movies, because it's just about these two guys and it's a story of friendship. And Mace, who is the Jose Riviera character who Ilias meets on his journey, is a misanthrope. Like, he doesn't want to be with people. He doesn't want to have friends. He doesn't like humans. He just likes animals. And yet Ilias does become his friend. And by the end of the movie, Mace is covering his body in Ilias' ashes.
Yes. Yeah.
It's very powerful.
Yeah.
And it's very unique to that genre.
Yeah.
It is,
I mean, they essentially become one being because he adopts Ilias's bow powers and is able to teleport for some reason. So they are like one entity at the end.
Yeah, and it's sort of like Obi-Wan Kenobi through the Force bestowing his power upon Luke as the teacher passing the torch. But here, oh no, it's the younger man who dies and then asks the older sort of roguish grizzled hero to smear himself in his ashes after a lengthy corpse burning scene.
Yes.
That in true Fulci style goes on for far too long and in far too much detail whilst prog rock plays. Yes, having watched The Beyond, I've gotten used to the idea that his kink is basically long, lingering shots of injuries with prog rock, which is just astonishing. But yeah, no, it's a really bizarre inversion of the passing the torch from the teacher to the pupil. And yeah, the pupil dies and empowers the older man, which is quite peculiar. And was it just me, or is there a sort of touch of the homoeroticism about the pair of them?
Yes.
But perhaps I'm just imagining that.
Oh, I think absolutely. I mean, I don't think it's sexual, but it's a love story. I mean, they fall in love. Yeah.
Yeah, I think so. I mean, certainly Mace tending Ilias's wounds and bringing him back to health when he sort of erupts in pussy lumps.
Yeah.
Yes.
Is quite tender and intimate, I thought.
It really is. And I think what you're talking about, all the body horror and the emphasis on the destruction of the human body, also plays against the genre, which usually celebrates the human form in its perfection. Like if it's Conan and we're like lingering lovingly on Arnold Schwarzenegger's pectoral muscles, or, all these movies have sequences like that where, and this one doesn't. This one lingers on pus coming out of a wound in his leg.
Yeah, a lot of pus.
And actually watching his body burn and the fat rended, the bones
the
reduced
skeleton.
to ash, in a sequence that I don't know. I should have timed it, but it has to be 3 or 4 minutes. I don't know.
Yeah.
I don't think I'm exaggerating.
No. It's got a full Claudio Simonetti track on it. It's a lengthy sequence.
It is, yes.
Yeah. If there is a body that is glorified, I think we should probably look no further than Ocron, the villainess of the piece. And she does not wear much throughout the movie. Basically, I think a codpiece or a rubbery merkin and a bronze helmet, which when you get to the end of the movie, you're very pleased that she's worn that bronze helmet because, spoilers again, she is not a looker under there.
No.
It's a bit of a shock.
She also seems to lose her voice when her helmet comes off.
Yes.
Yeah.
Yes, the great Zora would have gotten a bit of a shock if they'd consummated her bargain.
Ah, yes, that's right.
She offered him her body. She didn't
Not a
say
face.
Yeah.
what was under the mask.
No, she didn't. No.
But again, I feel like even though she is naked, she's very powerful. Like she doesn't present herself the way that, for instance, the women in another film of the same era, Sword and the Sorcerer, do.
Yeah.
Who are very, helpless and in need of saving and kind of incapable of doing anything. Like Ocron is like tough as nails. And she's using her power to control an entire civilization and consorts with, a very large python.
That's snakes.
So
yeah.
even though she is sexualized, I feel like it's an empowered sexuality. Like I don't get that icky feeling of she's, a male fantasy. I'm not sure. I think she's more a female fantasy.
Yeah. So she is definitely powerful. And going back to the ethereal aspect of Fulci's movies as well, like her character felt very, like almost like a Jodorowsky movie. Like it's very spiritual, religious. She's almost like a cult leader. And she has these prophecies. And they're really strange prophecies. They're always of Ilias with no face, by the way. He has no face in these prophecies, like killing her every time with laser arrows. All the scenes with her, there is a real sense of ritual and like this is a process that is beyond understanding, I guess, which made her a really interesting villain as well.
Yeah.
Like she wasn't just out to kill everyone. It had a sense of, religion. Like the scene where what are they doing? Blowing like cocaine into each other's mouths or something? I'm not sure.
If you ever wanted to see werewolves do cocaine, this is the movie for you.
Yeah, werewolves doing cocaine and then she writhes about on an altar with a snake in between her legs.
Yeah, many times.
To get her visions of a faceless Ilias, which again turns out to be apt because it's not Ilias. It is an embodiment of Ilias that finally is her downfall, but it is not him.
Yeah, you can feel, and I've felt this with other Italian movies that dabble in this, like you can feel their roots in Greek mythology and how often in Greek mythology, mythical figures try to cheat their fate, but never succeed.
Yeah. I did want to ask about the wolfmen as well. So are they created? Like there's a scene where there's a big glowing slab and there's a wolfman burning on it or something. He doesn't look very happy.
No.
Is she creating these beings or are they just part of the landscape and she's enslaved them? Because in the end, when she is defeated, she turns into a wolf. So I'm just like, well, what's the whole meaning about this?
It's entirely opaque to me.
That's one of the wonders of Conquest is, yes, it's impenetrable. We don't know.
Right.
I mean, all of the creatures in it are so strange, particularly those ones that live amongst the rocks.
Yeah, the really chirpy bird sounding.
Yes, covered in cobwebs. And the locations are fantastic. I think it was shot in Sicily, but there are these rock formations by the ocean that look like pillows. Like they're rock, but they're all soft, or it's kind of like a Salvador Dali painting, And these creatures are like in a fetal position, tucked in the alcoves of these rocks, and they are also white. It's really beautiful and weird. And what are they? I mean, I don't know. And they don't even none of these things are even named.
Yeah.
Or explained.
Yeah. There are some swamp zombies that appear at one point that Mace has to just stab with a blunt branch. Like it looks awful.
Yeah.
An awful way to die. And then there are dolphins at one point that help Mace. It's just a plethora of things.
Yeah, that's after he falls into the sea whilst tied to a cross. This is the second film we've done with you, Vincenzo, where there is a man crucified.
Yes, that's
in
true.
some form or another.
It must be a Catholic thing.
It must be, yeah. There are some great shots in there too. I mean, the swamp zombies, when they are, there's a great shot of them emerging from a moonlit swamp. I mean, it's beautiful, stylish stuff. And sometimes it seems to be less interested in creating an exciting action adventure movie as much as it is in just creating atmosphere. Because a lot of the times in the action scenes, like Mace is introduced with slow motion shots of him with his nunchucks. Are they? I'm not quite...
bone nunchucks or rock nunchucks.
It's very peculiar.
Yeah.
And then you just get shot after shot of slow motion werewolves trampolining
over him
towards him. Yes. And I just marveled at it, and I thought, this is just astonishingly odd and so alienating as a viewer. Is it supposed to be this weird?
I thought there was a scene where exactly what we were talking about, where Mace is crucified and thrown into the ocean, and Ilias shows up with his bow, and it's the turning point for him as a character because he was leaving the Dark Land to return home, and then he had a crisis of conscience and returns. And so when he does that and he takes out the bow becomes a laser bow.
Of course, yeah.
And, a normal, typical director would then crank up the speed of the scene. And there would be heroic music and things would go really fast. So what happens in this film is everything goes into slow motion and gets all dreamy. And then the sun, because it's a sunny day on the beach, turns blue and everything gets dark and weird and dreamy. And then the bow lights up. So yes, he kind of works against what would be the traditional rhythm of an action sequence like that. He counterpoints it with these kind of slow, dreamy moments. And the effect is unsettling, especially when you're not accustomed to that.
Yeah. And apparently this is a trend in Fulci. I read Kim Newman's great history of horror movies, and he said that Fulci toned down the splatter to focus on, quote, image-oriented lingering films, including Manhattan Baby or Possessed, which was also shot the same year, which Kim Newman describes as, quote, almost catatonic. So yeah, he was definitely interested in slowing these moments down and really focusing on them.
It feels sometimes like a French perfume ad, or
right,
because it's also beautiful, and it's all soft and sexy looking, and I think the wardrobe is great. Like Ilia's leather outfit is really neat and perfectly tailored, and there's a lot of very pretty imagery on display in the midst of all the gore and, business of, ripping people in half and so on.
Yeah, I mean, we should mention that. Like, the gore is extreme gore. This is not for the faint-hearted. It's not for vegetarians. Yeah, you've got a woman literally pulled in half by her legs. Like, her body rips in half. And you see that, which is... it's great. That's really good. You have Ocron's chest exploding every time she's killed. And also her face is not something you should be showing every day. Swamp zombies getting staked with blunt branches. And yeah, just so much blood in this movie. More so than any other fantasy movie I've ever seen. But yeah, it's very Fulci though. That's the thing.
Yeah, immediately after the torn limb from limb scene, I was marveling at the fact that we had a bare-breasted woman in a bronze mask eating the dead girl's brains from her disembodied head.
Yeah, you have two decapitated head scenes, and they are very detailed heads, especially in the end with Elise's head, and it comes alive as well. Like, he opens his eyes. I'm assuming that's his actual face.
Yeah,
but it's disturbing.
Yeah, I think that the brutality of it also is what makes it feel like it's from this other place. It comes from a place with different moral values and from a much more primitive, crueler world than the one pitiless world than the one that we exist in. And by the way, it should be mentioned that the dark world that Ilias goes to is very primitive. And you mentioned Quest for Fire. Like, the people there don't look like they're even fully evolved as humans.
Yeah.
Or they look like early humans, and they're living in caves. and they're living in squalor and misery. There's just a sense of rawness, and that this is a world that is primordial and untamed.
Yes. Yeah. I mean, even going with their weapons, they're all rock. They're just very, very makeshift, early primitive weapons. And I would hazard to say, I'm not sure whether anyone would agree, but I feel like the movie, it is beautiful, but it is also quite ugly. It's quite filthy. Like everything looks grimy and filthy, and it could be because of the soft focus as well and the amount of fog everywhere, but it really looks dirty. Like the whole film doesn't have this sort of pristine Conan glistening look. It has a really dusty, grimy feel to everything.
And that's the other thing that I quite enjoy and appreciate about it, is that it's all shot on real locations, minus perhaps the cave interiors, and I think falls a little bit in line with, if you've ever seen Pasolini's fantasy films like 1001 Nights, or his Oedipus Rex, or his Medea, or Canterbury Tales. I strongly recommend them, because he would only shoot them in real locations, mostly with non-professional actors.
Right.
And the effect is, it feels really authentic. And they're shot verite style. Conquest isn't really, but you feel kind of like, oh, we're a documentary crew in Arabia 1,000 years before Christ.
Right.
And, Pasolini would be one of the best known Italian filmmakers of the time. And I can't believe that Fulci wouldn't have seen those films and perhaps be influenced by them. And I feel like some of that has been carried over into this movie.
Right.
Now it's time for Random Trivia.
So Dan, what thrilling piece of trivia did you discover tied to a rock zombie today?
My piece of trivia is not about this film, but it is about Fulci's renowned film, Zombie. It's very confusing, because when it came out, it was marketed as Zombie 2, a sequel to Dawn of the Dead, but it's not at all. And apparently back then you could declare something as a sequel without permission or something. So
in Italy, I think Italy played fast and loose. And the great thing about that, I mean, I was talking about Italy having this very responsive to trends approach to filmmaking. Fulci managed to get Zombie 2 into cinemas 2 months after Dawn of the Dead was released in Italy, and took the box office by storm.
Oh, amazing.
So that's pretty fast moving. I don't know whether he was in production whilst Dawn of the Dead was finalizing, or whether it was just very quick turnaround.
Right.
I don't know.
Yeah. And I think he also wrote and co-directed or partly directed Zombie 3 as well. Which is, it's just so confusing, because there's no Zombie 1, really.
It's just Dawn of the Dead. They just stole it.
Yeah. And that's our trivia.
Yes. The film was not a success. According to Italian film historian Roberto Curti, it yielded less than 100 million Italian lira in the box office in April 1983, which sounds like a lot, of course, but lira being lira, that's about $66,000 in 1983 dollars, which is about $200,000.
Right.
It was the first in a 2-picture deal for Fulci with the producer Giovanni Di Clemente, but he didn't make the second film because the two of them fell out. Quote from Fulci, "I had a contract to make 2 films with Giovanni Di Clemente, but he was such a terrible producer that after Conquest I refused to make the second one. Consequently, he tried to sue me, but I won the lawsuit because the Italian constitution says that if you don't wish to work, you're not obliged to."
Right.
There's a constitution for you. That was an interview from 1993. So apparently he had little to do with the post-production of Conquest. He left it to his frequent editor, Vincenzo Natali. He just checked the results, but he was not terribly invested in the finished product.
Okay.
In sort of summaries of his career, it tends to be treated as sort of like the ugly stepchild that they don't really want to mention, which is a shame because I haven't seen a lot of his movies, but it feels like a fascinating gem.
Yeah, I agree. I feel like it's very solid. It's a good story. I think it ends in a really interesting way. I think that there's some really shocking turns, and it's structured very simply but economically. And for me, it accomplished everything that I hoped it would. It seems to have achieved what it set out to do. And if it wasn't successful at the time, well, maybe it's just because the world wasn't ready for it.
Yeah. One thing I wanted to bring up is there isn't a lot of dialogue in this movie. And a lot of the talking by the characters is in a language that we don't even understand as well. There's no subtitles. I guess it's a made-up language. And the dialogue that does exist, I guess it's dubbed, right? Like a lot of Italian movies at the time.
Yeah.
So you're kind of visually following a story. Like it does more with visuals and actions rather than dialogue. And maybe that, for most viewers, that's not interesting, I guess. I don't know.
It could be with substances.
Well, yeah.
Well, maybe it wasn't released well either. I mean, I was alive at that time and looking for that kind of thing, and I'd never heard of it. I didn't hear of it until 2020 or something like that. So, it probably was a little bit of a victim of poor distribution.
Yeah.
It's one of my favorite Fulci films. Like in my list, I would put it in the top 5, and I think it is uniquely him, and I think he's done something with that subgenre that no one else did. So it's very special, and it's a lower budgeted film. We see the seams.
Yeah.
But that's part of, what makes it so charming. And there's a kind of naivete to the presentation of some things that is actually in keeping with the material. So I don't have a problem with it.
Yeah. I mean, one thing that is very unique about this movie, and for someone, Vincenzo, you've just released an album, but the music of this movie, fantasy, does not normally have synth scores.
Yeah, and it's a great score.
Yeah.
They tend to go for romantic orchestra, don't they, to try and get the sense of classicism, even though, of course, the time period's totally wrong. But no, it's an odd score. So it's a member of Goblin, of course.
Yeah, it's a great score, and it's full of, ambient tracks as well. Like, it's an interesting synth score. It's not like the Alan Parsons Project doing Lady Hawk.
Yes, which doesn't work.
Which I really feel was a bad choice.
Yeah.
In this case, I think it meshes with the movie very nicely. And, there is a science fictional quality to the movie as well. Like, maybe it takes place in the far future. It doesn't really specify. We don't know. And perhaps it was at that time popular to use synth scores. Tangerine Dream did Ridley Scott's Legend, famously replacing the Jerry Goldsmith score.
Sacrilege.
Yes. But that was a number of years later.
Yeah, 85, yeah.
I mean, I think why the synth score works for this movie is it's not trying to sound 80s, I guess. I mean, it is the 80s. Like, you can't really get away from that. But it's quite experimental. It's quite ethereal. It's quite strange in how they've scored it. Also, it's not trying to sound like an orchestra as well. It's really embracing its electronic sound. Like, it doesn't sound like, here's some fake strings. I mean, there are parts where there are flutes, I guess, but it's not trying to sound very authentically fluty. Like, it's still very electronic and very strange. It fits the vibe of the movie. And also a lot of the sound effects, the sound of the bow is all synth sounds, I'm assuming. Like, it's not, all the sound effects aren't trying to be too authentic. It does have that science fiction element that you mentioned, Vincenzo.
Yeah. I would even say that there are points where I can't distinguish between the music and the sound design in a good way.
Yes.
And I love it when music and atmosphere and sound design blend together.
Yeah.
And I guess, the other thing to mention is I quite like the cast.
Yeah.
I like Jorge Riviero. He's great. He has real presence, and there's a soulfulness to him and a kind of sensitivity. Like, you really emotionally connect with him. And I liked Andrea, I'm going to mispronounce his name, Alcapinti, who plays Ilias too. I think he's very pretty and has all the necessary qualities for that type of Luke Skywalker character. And I like Sabrina Sellers, who plays Ocron. I don't know if that's her voice or not, but I actually like the voice of Ocron.
Yeah, I mean, essentially you only really have 4 characters in the movie and just a bunch of side characters, because most of the other characters are masked as well, or they're wolfmen. So you never see anyone's face.
Yeah, and although you do get a quote-unquote love interest for Ilias at one point, she's brutally killed right before the moment where you're expecting the love scene to start.
Yeah, that's right.
That was
yeah.
an amazing moment. It's so shocking and brutally killed, and suddenly.
Yeah.
It's horrific.
Yeah, and again, one of the reasons why, along with Ocron, rather than being a passive object of desire, being a figure to be admired and feared, it also avoids the gauzy sex scene.
Yeah, I really think that, has aged well.
Yeah.
I think Zora's a fun character.
Yes.
Because, he's invoked by Ocron, and Ocron really gives him a lot, right? Her body, her soul, anything to kill this guy who supposedly she predicts will kill her. And Zora, you know what? He delivers.
Yeah.
He brings her the head of Ilias. And then at the very end, when they're out on this outcropping of rock where Ocron greets the sun every morning because she claims that she's responsible for the sun rising. So while she's, a witch, she's also a bit of a charlatan too, which I think is fun. Then Mace shows up with the bow and Zora says, he just goes, ugh. And he vanishes. He's like, I'm done with you.
Yeah. I mean, Zora's also really interesting because he attacks Mace at one point by being Mace. So you have a fight scene with Mace fighting another Mace, but he doesn't quite look like Mace. I thought, hey, he looks different. They obviously got a body double that looks very similar. But yeah, it's an interesting fight scene.
Yeah. Doppelganger scene. This film has so much stuff.
Yeah. Just going back to one of the episodes we did earlier this year, we did Eric the Viking. And I complained about that movie because it is another fantasy movie, a journey, but only really 3 things happen in that movie. Whereas a lot of things does happen in this movie. There is constantly peril. They're constantly getting attacked by Ocron's men. And there's the weird poison quill barrage scene. You don't even see what is shooting those things, but
Shooting out of a bush.
Yeah.
Did Zora transform himself into a bush?
Yeah.
Or is he hiding in the bush?
I don't know. I'm not sure.
It's just hay fever is really violent back then. It's, it's bad.
I see. Yeah.
Yeah. Coming to you live from the Movie Oubliette Theatre, it's the prestigious Mobley Awards.
Hello, it's everyone's favourite part of the pod. It's the Mobley Awards, where we nominate our favourite blue laser arrow-piercing parts of the film in a number of disgustingly blood-spurting categories.
Best quote.
I like "No one can rule the sun,"
Yes.
which actually is a good line.
Yeah, it is.
It is, although Ocron is convinced she can and is.
Yeah.
She's fooled the wolf people into thinking so anyway.
Yes, definitely. She does like doing her her rallies
Yes.
with the wolf people.
Which consist of 7 or 8 people and a goat.
Yeah, that's
Yes. Yeah. Mine is more of a conversation than an individual line, but it's Mace's introduction to Ilias, and Ilias asks what his name is, and Mace says, "My enemies call me Mace," and Ilias replies, "And your friends?" And Mace says, "I don't have any friends."
Yes.
So
Yeah.
he has no name.
Yeah.
Best hair or costume?
I'll nominate Ocron's horned G-string
Yeah.
or spiked G-string.
It is rather special, isn't it? Is it a G-string or is it just a merkin that's
merkin,
glued
yeah.
on?
Yeah.
Something.
Yeah.
No, I think it's a G-string. I think there's...
Okay.
I'm not entirely clear on my definitions, but it's not just taped on
Right. Yeah.
Okay.
It's attached.
That's a relief.
or stuck on.
Yeah, that is a relief. Yeah, I quite liked Ilias's outfit as well. Is it called a peplum? Because that's a whole genre of Italian movies, isn't it? Is
That's
the
right.
peplum movies? All of the barbarians and gladiators and so on would have these little tiny sort of skirts, I guess.
Right,
That they're wearing. Yeah.
And he's got that arrow quiver in his boot.
Yes.
That was pretty neat.
Yeah.
Most 80s moment.
For most 80s, I put evil queens trying to stop a self-fulfilling prophecy.
Yeah.
I was thinking particularly of Bavmorda in Willow, who's so desperate to stop the baby that she's heard will result in her damnation that she blows herself up. Princess Mombi in Return to Oz, Ursula in The Little Mermaid in 89, Taramis in Conan the Destroyer. Lots of evil queens in the 80s.
Yeah.
It's true. Anything that glows counts as 80s as far as I'm concerned.
Yes.
So, and I'm a sucker for it. Like if somebody's eyes glows, I'm in. If somebody's weapon glows, I'm in.
Yes.
I can't get too much of it. I don't know why, but
Yeah, that kind of glowing neon rotoscoped animation really is a signature of the 80s, I think. In animation, live action, Star Wars movies, everything. It's everywhere.
Yeah.
never grows tired from it.
No.
Favorite scene?
My favourite scene was probably the werewolf fight scene where there was just lots and lots of trampolining stunts.
Ah, yes.
Just because it was just not the action scene that I was expecting at all. It sort of slowed down and revelled in the beauty of the whole thing, which I thought was quite an interesting choice, an unexpected one, and I enjoyed it a lot.
Yeah.
I thought it had a grace and beauty to it that I was not expecting.
Yeah. Was that the introduction of Mace, that scene?
Yeah.
Yes. Because you have Ilias running out of arrows to start off with. So he's just fleeing these people and they catch up to him and you think, oh, this is going to be a very short movie. But then, Mace shows up with his slow-mo nunchucks and, defeats them all. It's a great introduction to Mace.
It is. Yeah. He's definitely the hero of the piece. It's signaled early.
Yes. Favorite scene for you, Vincenzo?
For me, it would have to be werewolves snorting cocaine.
Oh,
I don't think there's any way to top that. Or whatever. I mean, whatever it is that they're snorting.
Yeah.
And the way they do it too, because they have like this like straw that's 2 feet long.
Yeah.
Most cliche moment.
I would say the magical weapon in fantasy
Yeah, I was gonna
films.
say that.
Yeah, you've got the glaive and Krull, the tri-sword and sword and sorcerer, and you've got the magical laser bow in Conquest. You got to have it.
Yeah. You've got to have a magical weapon that only works in the finale. Well, I suppose this one works.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Maybe Ilias's dad.
Oh, yes. The Zeus-like figure.
Yes, the archetypical white-bearded Zeus god daddy.
Yeah.
Yeah.
You've got to have that.
Best special effect.
Might sound an odd thing to say, but I quite liked the growing pus-filled boils on Ilias as he succumbs to the poison darts of the grasses of the Dark Realm. Yeah, I thought they were really good, really disgusting and visceral and delightfully gloopy. I thought it was very impressive work.
Yeah. A lot of close-ups of them, and it just gets
Oh, yeah.
progressively worse.
I'm very partial to those weird white webby creatures that live on the rocks.
Yeah.
It's such a simple effect. Like I don't even know that their mouths are moving, even though they talk. But there's just something inherent in their design. It's the simplicity of their design that is really striking. And instantly they have a character, like a very specific character to them. And I think what I appreciate about it is the minimalism of that approach and how effective that can be.
Yeah. I mean, you also see them during the day as well. So you see everything, like the whole creature design. And the eyes, the weird looking eyes as well.
Yeah, and it's just so inexplicable why they're covered in web, even though they're on these rocks by the ocean.
Yeah.
Yeah, they're very striking. Quite original creation, I think. I can't remember anything like them in fantasy cinema of the 80s.
They almost remind me of like something from a Miyazaki movie.
Right, yeah.
They have that quality.
Yeah, it's true.
I guess because the sound they make is very odd as well. Like they're not. It's a really high pitched kind of chirpy. I think it's a synth as well. Like it doesn't sound acoustic. It sounds electronic.
Yeah. That's my pick for favourite sound, actually.
Right.
Yeah. It sounds like electronic howler monkeys.
Right, yeah.
Favorite sound effect.
I mean, I would say the bow sound, or the even the start when they summon the bow has a very synthy whooshy sound. But yeah, when the arrows are formed, that has this kind of science fiction-y, synthy sound effect to it. It's great.
Yeah.
Yeah, I love that. And I will go for any gory sound, which are all wet and juicy and
Oh, yeah.
dreadful.
All those blood spurting scenes, just very wet sounding. Oh, my God.
So wet. And anytime someone gets hit in the head, their whole,
Everything just...
scalp has to like disintegrate into
Liquefy.
the most disgusting, melon-crushing sound effect.
Yeah, and everybody's brain's made out of like oats.
Yeah.
Oats and blood.
Most funniest moment.
For me, the funniest moment is when that poor guy is like, caught a goat or something, and he's happily, merrily walking through the valley and is struck in the chest with an arrow.
Yeah. Yeah.
Completely out of the blue. Like, and then dies slowly.
Yes.
Like he doesn't.
That's right.
That's like the slow painful death. I mean, he was just getting his dinner.
Yeah. Poor guy. Funniest moment for you, Conrad?
So my funniest moment, I have multiple, but my absolute favourite, which made me roar for some reason, I don't know why, is when Mace is fighting a bunch of werewolves. There is a point during the fight where he looks down and discovers that there are two feasting on his meaty thighs.
Oh, yes, that's
And
right.
it's almost like they're like insects or parasites. It's just like, oh, yeah, I've got a couple of these chomping away. I ought to deal with that too. Like an afterthought. It made me roar. I thought it was ridiculous.
Oh, no.
And that's our Mooblies.
Hi, this is Duncan Skiles, director of The Clofitch Killer, and you're listening to Movie Oubliette.
Oh yes, it's final verdict time. Should Lucio Fulci's Conquest be set free from its forgotten prison to pillage the minds of many and be praised once more? Or should it be clobbered with a rock nunchuck, dismembered and dumped back in the depths of the oubliette, never to be talked about again? Vincenzo, you have introduced us to the glory of Conquest. Would you recommend this movie?
I have been conquered by Conquest. I like this movie. The more I talk about it, the more I see it. So please release it. Set Conquest free.
Yeah. I mean, in terms of Fulci movies, it's so interesting that he's taken fantasy in this direction. I just would never have expected it. And yeah, I really do want to watch more Fulci movies. Like I've seen 4 now. I have to watch more of his stuff. And yeah, I think what he brings to any genre is his splatter gore, but also his sense of ethereal weirdness and sort of art direction that is very strange to watch, especially in a fantasy movie. But I would 100% recommend this movie to people.
Yes, I would agree. I mean, it was not what I was expecting at all. I don't know what I was expecting. I guess I was just looking for, expecting like a bit of a trashy, cheap Italian Conan the Barbarian ripoff. And it is so much not that, even though possibly the investors wanted that, but they did not get it. They got this curious, ethereal movie with quite a few surprises if you're expecting the traditional hero's journey. So it's just aesthetically quite odd, narratively quite challenging, and I was never bored, put it that way. I was very much entertained, and it was that sort of strange seafood dish that you might crave if you're a little bit bored of other 80s fantasy movies. So yeah, I would actually. I was quite bewitched by it all.
Oh, this makes me so happy. I didn't know how you guys are going to respond to it. I would not have immediately assumed that you would let it out of the oubliette.
Yeah. I mean, I would warn people, it's not for the squeamish. It is definitely...
No.
If you don't like gore, do not watch this movie.
No.
And I'm not sure everyone will appreciate it in the way that we have. I mean, some people will just see cheapness and, silliness, and I think it takes a certain kind of twisted mind to fully understand what's special about it.
Sure.
Yeah. Well, let's check in with our patrons to see what they thought.
I'd be curious to know.
Hello, Hal.
Yes, Conrad.
What's the result of the patrons' vote, please?
You'll never guess. They want to set it free.
Oh.
Yes, they have. They're 67% to 33%. So it was not unanimous. Eddie Coulter says, I saw this gem at the way too young age of 11 at a drive-in.
Wow.
Wow.
That's very young.
And I've been a fan ever since. This movie needs to be freed for the Oubliette just so the insanity can be seen. Film aficionado says, Italian audiences were right. This is trash.
Oh.
Uncompelling characters, tiresome action, bargain bin wolfmen, an expected dose of Fulci's usual misogyny, and those are just the parts I could see through the incessant fog and darkness. Throw this boring mess back into the Oubliette along with the rest of Fulci's movies. To which Jasmine replied, I vote this is the best movie Oubliette comment of the month for August. Yes, Jasmine also not a fan, I don't think. I have seen far more of the Conan the Barbarian bandwagon jumpers than I can count, and I have no idea why I do that to myself. Only a small handful are legitimately good films. The best I can hope when I watch one is either it's moderately entertaining or so awful it's funny. Conquest commits the crime of being neither. Its leads are just slightly more convincing than the terrible special effects, but mostly it's just plain boring and silly instead of interesting and exciting. On the other hand, it's still more entertaining than most of the Fulci horror movies I have endured.
Well, it seems that, the people who don't like, if you don't like Fulci, this is a good indicator for you out there.
Yeah.
If you don't like Fulci, do not go to visit Conquest.
Yeah. I do think Fulci is kind of acquired taste, I guess. It's definitely not for everyone.
No, and it depends what you're going in for. I think if you have a certain set of expectations going in, it's not going to meet them. But if you're in for a bit of a surprise, I think it will deliver.
Yeah.
Well, we're setting this one free.
Yes.
Off you go, Conquest. You have conquested.
I'm so delighted.
Yes. Well, thank you so much for bringing this movie to us, Vincenzo. Where can people follow you and find out more about what you have going on?
Well, I am on Twitter at Vincenzo_Natali. And I am also on Instagram at Vincenzopoulos, if you can manage to spell that.
Oh, yes.
And I like to mention that I do have a digital archive online, which is essentially just like all of my storyboards and scripts and various ephemera related to things that I've done.
Oh, wow.
And that's vincenzo-natali.com. And I also want to mention that somewhat by coincidence, I will be presenting a 35 millimeter print of Conquest here in Toronto at my favorite movie theater, the Review Cinema.
Wow.
On October 22nd. And furthermore, I have painted a poster for that screening. The Review is known for these amazing posters that they do for their individual screenings. And so when they brought this up, I was like, please let me do a poster.
Wow. Amazing.
So if you're in Toronto, please come by. I'll be there.
It's absolutely beautiful.
Oh, thank you.
Yeah. You've captured the palette of the movie perfectly. And of course, Ocron is the focal point and she looks magnificent in it.
Cool.
I must say, I do like Ocron. Yeah, I feel like, if you know the artist Richard Corbin, Conquest could almost be a Richard Corbin comic. And for those who don't know, Richard Corbin did various comics for heavy metal as well as things that he released independently. And he is a brilliant artist. And his stuff is very sensual and very primitive. Like there's a rawness and not just in the design, but also in his presentation of the stories and what he was prepared to put on the page that was quite shocking. And so I, in my own humble, limited way, tried to emulate him in this poster.
No, I think you did an incredible job. In fact, I was going to ask if you would mind us using it as the image for this episode.
I was hoping you would ask that.
Great.
Marvelous. Thank you.
This is wonderful.
Yes. So if you are in Toronto Do check out the Review Cinema's Halloween season, where they will be presenting a retrospective for The Godfather of Gore. They've got 4K restorations, anniversary screenings, and rare 35mm prints of his films, including Conquest.
The earlier show will be City of the Living Dead.
Ah, nice.
Wow.
Nice.
Okay.
Yep.
Yeah.
And if you want to keep up to date with everything Movie Oubliette releases, you can find us on all platforms as Movie Oubliette, and you can email us at movie.oubliette@gmail.com.
And if you'd like to support the show, head on over to Patreon, where for as little as $1 you can get access to extended portions of the show and nominate films for us to cover in future episodes. For $5 you get access to our exclusive monthly minisodes. This month we checked out one of our patrons' frequent nominations, Freddy as FRO7.
Yes. That film.
Fascinating British animated movie. And you can also vote on the final verdict as well. And for $10 you can be an executive producer like Chazilla, Eddie Coulter, Isaac Sutton, Dr. Doggy, Serge, iconographer, Ryan A. Potter, and Evan Goodchild.
Oh, yes. We have merchandise on Redbubble, a YouTube channel, and please, if you haven't already, give us a rating and review on whatever you're listening to us on. It does help us out a lot.
It does indeed, yes. So, Dan, I won't be here for the next episode. What will you be covering?
I know. I will be joined by Serge, a long-time guest. So we'll be in good hands. We will be covering, from 1993, the American science fiction horror film Carnosaur.
Ooh, dinosaurs.
Yes, I know. I actually explicitly requested a dinosaur movie with Serge because he loves dinosaurs and we've never done one I don't think we've ever done a dinosaur movie on the pod. So I'm really looking forward to this.
It's a waste not to when you've got Serge right there.
I know. Yeah. So it's a classic Roger Corman sort of rip-off movie directed by Adam Simon. So again, yes, another Roger Corman film that looking forward to checking out.
Yeah, I can't wait to hear what you make of it.
Yeah, me too.
Thanks again, Vincenzo, for joining us.
Thank you, Conrad. Thank you, Dan. It was wonderful.
Bye for now.
Goodbye.
We review the films others tend to forget. Come with us and open up the movie Oubliette.
Take on my ashes and anoint yourself.